Hi everybody and welcome back to Pick Up the Pieces. We're in the pickup kitchen today making some fresh salsa. We're also going to make what we call grandma's peppers, and I will show you how to make both of them. So we just recently realized that we're completely out of salsa, and I don't mind store-bought salsa, but since all of the produce is really fresh and fabulous this time of year, we've got great tomatoes and peppers and onions and things at the local farmers market. We decided we would make it up fresh. So this recipe is going to be water bath canned, both of them are, and I'm going to use my Presto pressure canner on the water bath can setting to process these jars. It is quicker and easier than just using a traditional boiling water water bath can method. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. So I've already filled up my pressure canner with water to the fill line, and it is warm water. And now I'm going to put my jars in, because you want your jars nice and hot and ready when your salsa is ready to go in them. So I'm going to set this for 10 minutes. When the salsa is in the jars and ready to process, that's how long it's going to process for. And now I can put my jars in. I filled up my jars about halfway with warm water. This is a step that half the time I forget. And if you forget this, your jars are going to flop over inside your canner, and then it creates a problem because you got to fish them out, check your water level, fill them. So don't forget to do that part. And now I'm going to get this lid on. Okay, and so my lid is on, and now they're going to warm, and so this is basically going to kind of sterilize the jars. They're brand new jars that I just got, brand new lids, brand new rings, but now the canner is going to do some of that work for me and get them ready to go. So this recipe is something that I love to make. I've made it multiple times. This is just from the Ball website, and Ball is a canning company. They make great jars and lids, but the recipes are pretty good too. So this recipe calls for 10 cups of chopped tomatoes, 5 cups of bell peppers, 5 cups of onions, 2.5 cups of a spicy pepper, apple cider vinegar, garlic, cilantro, salt, and then if you want to, you can put like a little hot pepper sauce in there as well. The recipe does say you need to peel your tomatoes. I don't do that. Any recipe that I ever make with tomatoes, I don't peel them. And so I'm going to show you how I make this recipe. So we're going to get those tomatoes chopped and ready to go. It's set about 25 tomatoes. We have an assortment here of some plum tomatoes and round tomatoes, and I'm just going to get these chopped up. And I'm going to use our favorite chopper to do this. This Müeller chopper is a major time saver, and so I'm going to use it for everything, for the onions, for the peppers, and the tomatoes too. And it does also say to take the seeds out of your peppers, but you don't have to take the seeds out of any of your tomatoes. Okay, so I'll do some at a time, and then what we're going to do is put them in this pot here, and then this pot will add sugar. And do we add sugar to this one? No, it doesn't get sugar. This one gets apple cider vinegar and garlic and other ingredients. So this is what you're dealing with if you want to hand chop, but if you use the Müeller, then everything goes through perfectly and with a lot less effort. So see, you can hand chop everything, or you can just use the chopper. And the chopper is much easier. So that is what we're going to do today. Sometimes you have to chop your veggies into like slightly smaller pieces so that they'll fit like on the screen, but even if you do that, it's still going to save you a ton of time. Okay, so just going to chop these maybe into fourths, and we're just going to get them all in here. And if you just kind of jiggle the chopper, then everything kind of settles on the bottom. Should probably have an apron on for this, but oh well. And if you have a nice sharp knife, it will also make it easier for you. I like using a mixture of the round tomatoes and the plum tomatoes. Just gives you a really good flavor. I feel like the plum tomatoes have a little bit less like liquid to them. They're more of a solid tomato, and then these ones just have a really nice flavor. You can get some of your seeds out of your larger tomatoes if you want to. It'll make your salsa a little bit less liquidy if you do that. But if you don't do that, it's fine. Your salsa will be fine. But some of these tomatoes have like a lot of seeds and that liquidy stuff, so I'm just gonna get rid of that. Okay, so my chopper's getting pretty full. See, you've got nice, perfectly diced up, evenly diced up tomatoes. I don't know about you, like I'm pretty good with a knife, but I would not say that all of my chops are like uniform by any means. And so using something like this also makes your finished product look a little bit nicer and more professional, because you're definitely gonna get an even chop or dice or slice or whatever on anything that you're using. Now, when you are doing a water bath can project, you want to make sure that you've got some boiling water going. The pressure canner, like when you first fill it up and you put your jars in to sterilize, it's going to do its job with the water to the fill line. But when you're actually doing the water bath canning itself and the jars are processing, they need to be completely covered by water. Usually the boiling water has to be like an inch above the jar. So you don't want to be stuck with jars that are ready to go and then you have no boiling water and you've got to wait to boil water to get them processing. So we do have a big stock pot on the stove right now with a bunch of water in it. We're bringing that to a boil, so it'll be ready to go when we are. So see, we've got another whole container's worth of tomatoes ready to go, and I'm just going to keep doing this until all of our tomatoes are chopped, and then after that we'll do some peppers. So this is sort of the last little bit of tomatoes, and I'm realizing that maybe the apron is a good idea because these tomatoes are a little bit messy, so we'll get that on and finish up with these tomatoes. And then we'll move on to peppers. I'm going to do the onions last, only because they make me cry. My pressure canner is ready. It's done its job, and it's saying we can fill jars. However, we're not ready yet, and that is okay. It will keep the jars warm and ready, so no problem. Okay, so that is the last container of tomatoes, and so this is what we've ended up with, is a whole bunch of chopped tomatoes, and that is great. Now the recipe also says we need 1 1/4 cups of cider vinegar, so I'm going to put that in now. We also do need 3 cloves of finely chopped garlic, so I will get that chopped up. I'm not going to use the chopper for this just because the chopper has the blade in it for like a larger dice, and this needs to be a little bit finer. So I'm going to just do this the old-fashioned way. And just use my little paring knife here. So that is 3 cloves of garlic, and I diced it up pretty fine. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is some green peppers. Some of the green peppers at our farmer's market started to turn some pretty colors. That's fine by me, I don't mind. And so we're gonna use these. If you wanted to use red peppers, you could, but I sort of like to see the different vegetables in my salsa. Like, I like to see the contrast between them. So having peppers that are light green, and then like these, which are the spicy ones that I'll do in a minute, and then having peppers that are the darker green with the red tomatoes and the white onions, it's just really pretty to look at. I'm gonna just use my measuring cup here to get these seeds out of the way. That way they don't get all over the cutting board. I find sometimes when you take the seeds out of peppers, they get everywhere, and we don't need that. We want them out of the way, and then we'll use our chopper to dice up these peppers. And these are sweet bell peppers. They're not going to add any heat. They're just going to add nice texture and nice flavor. And then we have peppers from our garden, the banana peppers that we grew this year. We did pretty well. We had quite a bit of peppers. It was a successful garden year for us this year. So we're going to use some of our homegrown banana peppers as the spicy pepper in this salsa. You can pretty much use any pepper you want. The recipe says hot banana, Hungarian wax, serrano, or jalapeno peppers. We chose to use the banana peppers this year. So I'm just going to get these peppers into more manageable pieces. It's easier to chop them if they're a little smaller. And keeping these the same size as the tomatoes and the same size as the onions, it's all going to then cook more evenly. And when you scoop up your salsa onto a chip, it's going to get you a nice bite of salsa with all of the ingredients sort of perfectly in proportion, if that makes sense. Still finding some seeds in here, just getting them out. Couple more seeds. Okay, so there's our first batch of peppers going in. Okay, so that is the last of our sweet peppers. And I don't know, I feel like I should probably get my hot peppers out of the way and then go to my onions. So I'm going to put gloves on, and I'm also going to get this cleaned off. So having a nice clean cutting board is helpful because then, you know, things aren't sliding around in that tomato juice. All right, so I'm going to get these gloves on, and I'll do my hot peppers next, and then I'll do my onions after. All right, so we've got about 15 of these banana peppers. These are smaller. The recipe said around 13 medium-sized peppers, but because we have smaller ones, I'm just going to use a little bit more. So 15 peppers instead of 13. I'm just going to get these stems out of the way as I cut them off. And the recipe said to take the seeds out of the hot peppers. And so I will do that. These peppers have been pretty spicy. And you don't really, personally, I like a little bit of spice in my salsa, but I don't want it to blow the top of my head off. So we're going to sort of be cautious, and we'll take the seeds out. And so to take the seeds out of these longer peppers, I'm just going to cut them the long way like this, and then I'm just going to take that little bit of membrane out and get the seeds into my measuring cup. So I will do that with all of our peppers. So if a couple of seeds get into your salsa, it's okay, but really this white membrane in the pepper and those seeds do hold a lot of heat, so getting really, 97% of them out is a very good idea. We have a little compost pile by our garden, so I will probably throw all this pepper stuff by our compost. We also do have a garbage disposal. A lot of our stuff we do put down the garbage disposal as well. If we can put garden-worthy waste in the compost pile, we do. All right, so we're on our last couple of peppers here. We just have to chop these and put these in, and all we have to add is onion and salt and some cilantro. Now, cilantro is usually a polarizing topic. Either you love it or you hate it. If you want to leave it out of your salsa, that's fine. If you want to put some parsley in instead, that's fine, but we do like cilantro here, so cilantro will be going into our salsa. You definitely want to protect your hands when you are chopping hot peppers. The oils from the hot pepper will stick to your hands. And then later on, if you forget that you were working with peppers for a while and you go to scratch your eye, you're going to be sorry. So it is very good to protect yourself from the peppers. Okay, so now we have our hot peppers going in. And I'm going to get those hot peppers out of the way, the hot pepper seeds, so they don't cause me any trouble. And I feel like leaving my gloves on for onions maybe isn't a bad idea, but I'm going to rinse some of this hot pepper off of here. And the other thing you can do too is flip your cutting board over on the other side, and then you don't have any risk of getting hot pepper juice onto the next part or the next produce that you're working with. So the recipe said 6 to 8 medium onions. Some of these onions are kind of small, so we went with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 maybe. We'll see. That's probably what we'll end up using. Oh. Okay, so those onions were potent, and so I did some of them on camera when I realized that you did not want to see me crying ferociously. So all of these have been, I had to cut the ends off, cut them in half, peeled them, and then cut them in half again, so they're ready to go through the chopper. But this particular batch of onions is spicy because they're really potent. And so yeah, I don't know if there are people out there that can chop onions and never cry. I would like to hear from you, because every time I chop an onion, I'm a disaster. Ugh. I wonder if those tricks really work too. I know people say like put bread in your mouth, or I don't know. I know you can wear goggles. I've seen people wear goggles and that seems to help, but I don't have goggles that'll fit me. My daughter has goggles, but they're probably too small for me. But these are brutal. But I do love using this chopper, because as brutal as it was to get the onions ready for the chopper, I'm not having to touch them as much and chop by hand. So that is saving me some tears. Okay, so here's our first batch. And I wonder if we're going to have more than 6 pints of salsa, because this pot is filling up fast. But we'll see. Maybe we'll have more. Okay, whew, that is it for the onions. We'll get these in here. I'm going to get this out of the way so it doesn't make me keep crying, and give this a rinse. All right, so now the last thing is cilantro. So I took my bunch of cilantro, and so this was where my battery on my microphone died, and so much of the rest of the salsa prep video had no sound. So you now get to hear voiceover Stacy fill in the blanks. So here I am just ripping the leaves off of a bunch of cilantro. The recipe called for 2 tablespoons of cilantro, but I made a huge batch of salsa here, and so I ended up using the whole bunch. And after I got all the leaves off, I just kind of bunched them up so it was easier to chop them. And then I ran my knife through them initially just for a coarse chop, and then kind of went back and forth on a couple of different angles to chop the cilantro a little more finely. I don't like a big, huge hunk of cilantro in a bite of salsa, but I do like my cilantro to be evenly dispersed in the batch. And so I did a nice fine chop on it here, as you can see. And then it went into the pot, and then the pot went to the stove to come to a boil. So there we go, cilantro in the pot. And I just washed the excess cilantro off my hands. And then I put the pot on the stove and started to bring it to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, it cooks for 10 minutes, but it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to come to a boil. I did add 1 tablespoon of kosher salt to this recipe. You can certainly omit salt if your sodium intake is a concern to you. Store-bought salsa, however, does contain a tremendous amount of sodium. So here you can actually control the amount of sodium you put in, if any at all. And so that was after I stirred in the salt. And then here it had started to come to a simmer and cook down a little bit. The tomatoes release quite a bit of juice, which I'm pointing out to you there. And then the salsa starts to cook down. And keep in mind too, because it cans for 15 minutes water bath, not 10 as I originally said in the beginning of the video. This also will kind of continue to cook in the jar. So this was when it had cooked down a little bit more, and I just made sure to stir it at intervals so that nothing got burnt or stuck to the bottom. But now you can see it resembles more of an actual salsa. We like a thick, chunky salsa. We don't like a more of a pureed version of salsa, so this is what we stick with. You could certainly chop the vegetables finer or even maybe puree them a little bit if you prefer your salsa to be a finer consistency. So then when it was all reduced into the consistency that I liked, I just put my salsa into my jars. Now, you want to make sure you get a good amount of the actual solid vegetables in your salsa. You don't want it to be all solid vegetables and no liquid, but you also don't want it to be like no vegetables and all liquid. So my first couple of scoops with the ladle are mostly vegetables. And then when I top off the jars, I tend to top them off with the liquid. So you'll see I just fill up all the jars. Like I said, first 2 scoops mostly veggies, and then a little bit more liquid with the veggie with like the 3rd scoop. Now the salsa was very hot and my jars were very warm as well, so you do want to be very careful that you don't burn yourself. Also, if kids are helping, this may not be the best part for them to help with because you don't want them to get burned. So once all my jars are full, I'm going to just check them to see if they need a little bit more liquid added. Sometimes when the jar sits for a moment or two, the ingredients will settle a little bit, and then you'll see that you need just a little bit more liquid. You do want to avoid overfilling your jars though, because if you fill them too much, then they will not seal correctly when you can them. So within whatever the recipe says, amount of inches from the top of the jar. Sometimes it's an inch, sometimes it's half an inch. You just have to read your recipe and it will tell you. And one of my jars ended up being a little bit too full. So you'll see that I take a spoon and I remove a couple spoonfuls of the salsa from the jar so that, again, I get a good seal on the jar and all my efforts don't go for nothing. So then I think I realized I took too much out. So then I put a little bit more back. Now you want to take a damp paper towel and just wipe the rim of every one of the jars. And then you want to fingertip tight put your fresh canning lids and rings onto your jars. These jars were very hot. I realized as I tightened the lid on the first one that touching it with my bare hand was not very comfortable. So I grab an oven mitt here and then hold my jars with the oven mitt when I continue to put on the rest of the lids. Like I said, the salsa was really hot and the jars were really hot. We ended up with a total of 14 jars of salsa. This was just the first 6 that I processed, but then there were 8 more after this. And I put the lid on the pot so that the salsa would stay hot. So when I was ready to can the next batch, it would be ready to go. So here I'm loading it into my Presto pressure canner. This is a water bath canning recipe, but I am using the Presto pressure canner as it saves time and energy, and it really is so automatic and nice. It makes canning a breeze. So once all the jars are in, I used a smaller saucepan to spoon over some boiling water. When you water bath can, your jars need to be covered by about an inch of boiling water so that they process correctly. And so I was just adding the boiling water to the pressure canner so that I could then put the lid on and get it going. So the lid goes on and it gets locked into place. Okay, so our first batch of salsa is processing in the Presto canner, and now we're going to move on to our second project for the day, which is grandma's peppers. So we call these grandma's peppers because we got a jar of these at like a local farm market, and they are basically banana peppers that are cooked in like kind of a sweet vinegary sauce. We loved them. We actually used them like on a slow cooked, like almost like a pot roast sandwich kind of thing. And we could certainly go back and buy more from the person locally who makes them and sells them. They were amazing, but also we thought maybe we would try to make them ourselves. And so we call them grandma's peppers, but basically they are banana peppers that are cooked in a ketchupy, lemony, vinegary sauce with a little bit of oil, and they're really delicious. So we're gonna give this a shot. So first we're gonna get the sauce going. I've got a pot here. I'm going to add, this is a cup of lemon juice and a cup of white vinegar. I used the bottled lemon juice. This is what I had on hand. You could certainly squeeze fresh lemons if you'd like to. There is a half a cup of olive oil that goes into this. So that is ready to go. And we've got 2 cups of ketchup. This is Heinz ketchup. And this is 2 cups of it. The recipe online, and I will link this below for you in the description, but this recipe said to use Heinz ketchup because it does not have thickeners in it. So we're using Heinz ketchup like the recipe said, and then we need 3 cups of sugar. So I have my baking ingredients like sugar and flour in these big buckets with gamma lids. I will link these in the description for you. But I buy big quantities of sugar and flour and bread flour, and then I store them in these buckets, and it keeps them fresh for a long time, and it's very economical because I'm buying in bulk. So we've got 1, 2, 3 cups of sugar. I'm going to bring this to the stove, get this cooking, and then I'm going to chop up these peppers. Okay, so while the sauce is cooking, then we're going to get the peppers prepped. This recipe said 60 to 70 peppers is what you need for this recipe, and it makes 6 pints. So we'll see if it really makes 6 pints. I wonder if it makes more than that. And though that is just the alarm on the canner saying that it is canning. So much like we processed our peppers in the last video, I'm going to do that again. And this recipe just said to chop up the peppers. So it just basically is in like bite-sized pieces that you cut these. And you do take the seeds out. So Just gonna do that again with a whole bunch of peppers. And when that sauce comes to a boil and all of these are chopped up, these will go into that sauce. And they will cook a little bit. They'll come back to a boil. Once they've come back to a boil, then you put them in jars and you water bath can this for 35 minutes. So this will take longer. So if we have to, we will use the spicy pepper. We will use the water bath canner if we have to, in addition to the Presto canner, because we are doing multiple batches here of salsa, and then we're going to have these going too. So if, like I said, if we have to do it, we can use the pot to can and the Presto pressure canner to water bath can at the same time. That way we're done a little faster. Okay, so this is what 65 or so peppers ended up looking like after they've been chopped. We basically cut them in half, took the seeds out. I had a little help from my husband. That way we could get this done in processing. And so this is what it looks like, and now we're going to add it to the sauce. Our sauce for the grandma's peppers came to a bubble. So we're adding all of these peppers in. And then the instructions said just to bring this back to a boil, so peppers go in the sauce. Bring it back to a boil, and then you pack your jars with the peppers, top it off with the sauce, and then these process for 35 minutes. We've got a full pot once again. Get this all stirred up and let it start to come to a boil again. And record. All right, so our first batch of salsa is done. So I'm going to get these out of our canner, and then we can get the next batch in. Okay, so now we'll get the next batch of jars in and we'll get them heating up. So our peppers and sauce are not quite yet back to a boil, but I guess my concern when I first put all these peppers in the pot was that there was not going to be enough sauce or liquid, and that we were going to have to maybe make more of the sauce. But as it is cooking, the peppers must be releasing some liquid, because now it does seem like we're okay. So it has not quite come back to a boil, but I'm just kind of mixing it around. And we're going to let it do its thing. And so we'll show you what it looks like when it does come to a boil. All right, so this is our second batch of salsa going in, and this canner holds up to 8 pint jars, which if I had thought about that when I was doing my first batch of salsa, I would have filled it, because it looks like we've got maybe 14 jars of salsa here, not just 6. All right, and we're looking good. And so I'm just gonna put my lid on. And in 15 minutes, those 8 jars will be all set. All right, so our banana peppers are ready. So the recipe said to fill the jars with the peppers first and then top it off with the sauce. So I am going to save myself a little mess here. So it said take a slotted spoon and fill your jars with peppers. So that's the first step, and then you just top it with the sauce. So we're gonna get as many peppers as we can in each jar. I'm gonna stop putting my head above this pepper pot because I keep inhaling hot pepper fumes and it's frightening. Now the recipe said that it made 6 pints, and I've prepared 10 pints here just in case it makes more. The salsa recipe said it made 6 pints, and then when I went to can it, surprise, it made 14 pints. So I just wanted to be prepared. So I don't know, like I said, if I'm gonna make more than 6 pints or exactly 6, but I've got 10 jars ready just in case. I feel like I underfilled my first jar just a little bit. I feel like a couple more peppers could probably go in there. So again, just using a slotted spoon. To fill the jars with the peppers, and we are going to water bath can this in the traditional pot. My Presto pressure canner is still working on some salsa for me, and that's great, but I don't want to be working on this all night long, so we're going to get this water bath canner going simultaneously and then finish up our projects soon. That is 5, although I feel like I can probably get a couple more peppers in each jar. Let me take a spoon here. Oh yeah, I can definitely fill these up with more peppers. So 6 might actually be right. Like I said, I found the recipe online and it said it made 6 jars, and then as I was chopping up 65 peppers, I thought, oh man, this is going to make 1,000,000 jars, but these peppers did cook down, so it might be accurate. So I'm really packing these peppers in the jar. Again, trying to not inhale these peppers too much because they are spicy here. Okay, I think that jar is pretty full. I think that jar could use some more. I think this first jar can use some more. I think 6 might actually be accurate. I'm just trying to fish out all the peppers. And then we just have to spoon the sauce over the top. And then we can water bath can these. These take 35 minutes in the water bath canner. And that is my Presto canner telling me it is all set, but it is going to go through a cooling cycle. And I don't know if you could hear that snap, but that was the last salsa jar sealing up. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is start filling these with the sauce, only because I don't want to get them so full of peppers that I then can't get any of the sauce in, if that makes sense, because the sauce has to cover the peppers. So there kind of has to be enough room in the jar for that to happen. And it's going to kind of bubble down. So I may have overfilled, but we'll see what happens as we fill these up with the liquid. It's going to kind of bubble down, fill up the jars. And our water is coming to a boil, so that is a good sign. We're just going to let that sauce settle. And if we end up having a little bit of extra pepper and a little bit of extra sauce, I think what I'll do is just put it in a dish or a container in the fridge, and we'll have a taste of these soon. But it looks like we want to get this sauce sort of down in the jar with the peppers. So like I said, that's going to kind of bubble down a bit. And we have plenty of sauce. I was worried in the beginning that we were not going to have enough sauce to cover these peppers because the ketchup and sugar mixture was very thick. And so I was concerned initially, but now we actually appear to have some extra sauce, which is not a bad thing. So I'm going to kind of take out a couple peppers from this jar just because I don't want it to be too full. We've got to let, the jars have to seal. And so you can't really overfill, otherwise you're going to run into a problem. And you don't want to do all this work and then your jar doesn't seal. All right, I think we did pretty good. I'm going to see how much we have left. If it fills a jar, it fills a jar. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But then if this jar ends up being, not a lot of peppers or not full, that's fine because we'll just put this in our fridge and nibble on it. So maybe one more jar, maybe just a little bit of a jar. All right, so 6 jars, pretty accurate because we just have a little bit left here, and that's fine. I'm just going to put these to the side. I'll put this in the fridge. My family and I will enjoy it. But now we have our 6 jars. So the recipe says to make sure that you get the rims clean. You don't want any residual sauce or oil or whatever. So I'm going to make sure that I get them wiped well. And then that is going to go in the water bath canner. And like I said, these go for 35 minutes. there. And those are the last two. I'm just going to lower these. That is perfect. It is boiling. And this is going to go for 35 minutes. Ziggy, set a timer for 35 minutes. And so Ziggy is the name of our Alexa, and it will tell us when these are done, and we will show you the finished product. So here are our finished jars of salsa, and we had a little bit of salsa. Ooh, another one sealing. That's the best sound that a canner could hear, is that a can popped and sealed properly. So we know that we'll be able to put these on our pantry shelf and not worry about it because it will be preserved for a while. And so then we have some salsa left over. This was sort of what was at the bottom of the pot. And so that is what it looks like. This is still warm, but it is phenomenal. It's really good salsa. I'm handing this to the husband. He can eat it. So you don't have to hear me chewing. But it came out really good. We're really pleased we were able to get this done. And our grandma's peppers are processing, so we will show you what those look like very soon. So these are the grandma's peppers that we took. This was sort of what was left in the bottom of the pot that we're not going to be able to can because it's not a full jar, and that's fine. We gave them a taste. These are some spicy peppers, but they are good. And these are going to be excellent. Like I said, we usually eat this on a beef sandwich. I will take a pot roast and I will cook it in the slow cooker, and then we'll shred up the meat, put it on a roll with some cheese and some of these peppers and the sauce, and it is out of this world. So we'll show you the finished jars of grandma's peppers when they're done. It has been 35 minutes, and these are now ready to come out. These are our grandma's peppers. They've fully processed, so I am going to get these on the towel here to rest. They will cool overnight, and the jars will seal, and then they will be ready to eat when we are ready to have them. We saved some of the sauce from this because when we tasted it, it almost tasted a little bit like a nice hot sauce. So I'm not quite sure what we're gonna do with the extra sauce, but it seems like a shame to just dump it. So those are our 6 jars of grandma's peppers, and then this is our extra sauce. We've got 2 jars like this of this sauce, and we're gonna try to do something with it. I don't know, maybe add a little butter to it, put it on some chicken wings, or drizzle it over some eggs or something. But this is very tasty and very spicy, and these are now all done. So this is the end of our big canning day. Our salsa is done. Those jars are resting. We got 14 pints of salsa. We have our 6 pints of peppers. I want to thank you for joining us today. It means so much to me that you hang out here with me and you let me teach you things about canning and preserving. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. That helps me out so much. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.